by the River Pothole. So, he chose, in a very strange move, to minimise the chances of that happening as much as possible by being very upright. We're about to head into an area of Dublin known as the Liberties. The Liberties are known as such because back in the day when Dublin was a walled city, the Liberties would have fallen outside of those walls, meaning if you were to set up a business out here, you're going to be exempt from paying tax on that business. It also meant, on the flip side, that if you were to die out here, you'd be exempt from having anyone to investigate that, but that was a risk many people. And because the Irish distilleries refused to illegally export whiskey to the crime families that wanted to sell it in their speakeasies, a number of counterfeit Irish whiskey distilleries were set up in America, and they were not up to the same standard as Irish whiskey was here in Dublin. So it caused great reputational damage to the once pristine reputation of Irish whiskey. The distillery that we're on our way to see is the Teeling Whiskey Distillery, and it opened in 2015. When it opened in 2015, it was the first distillery to open in Dublin in over 120 years. There have been a couple that have opened in the meantime though, so we seem to be just about recovering from what the Americans did to us. And we'll see a couple of those new wave of whiskey distilleries later on in this tour. Distillery in 1875 that had a couple of barrels explode due to air pressure. And those exploding barrels caused a chain reaction that eventually resulted in a massive river of 5,000 barrels of undistilled whiskey flowing all throughout the streets of the Liberties here. And when that whiskey river caught fire, it caused the Great Whiskey Fire of 1875. Fortunately for the people, unfortunately for the pigs, one of the first things to catch fire was a pig, who then went squealing throughout the streets, making a most horrific noise, I can only assume. But it alerted everyone in the locality to the presence of the fire, so fortunately there was a very swift evacuation effort, and no one was hospitalized or killed due to smoke inhalation or burns or anything of that kind. But there were still 13 casualties, and all 13 of those casualties were due to alcohol poisoning. People had been scooping up the undistilled whiskey from the streets with their hands in their shoes and drinking it, and nearly 30 people were hospitalized with liver failure, with 13 of those people then dying. We've always been a very classy people here in Dublin. This is a song by the name of The Wild Rover. Now, when someone sings The Wild Rover, it is customary to do a series of claps during the chorus. I'm going to sing the first verse and chorus of this song, and I'll do the claps. Then second time around, I hope that you'll be paying attention, because I'm going to expect ye to do the claps. And I will mention, of course, this is a judgment-free zone, but going forward, if someone sings this song and you don't know how to do the claps, you will look very stupid indeed. So, pay good attention. This is a learning opportunity, and it's the one learning opportunity you're going to get. Anyway, I'm going to have to put down my microphone in a very strange position, because usually I would have my hands free because I had a headset, but my headset broke yesterday. So I'm going to be doing this for the first verse. I've been... Give me a sec. I'm upstairs. When I said these, I meant the stop buttons. After much anticipation. I've been a wild rover for many's a year, and I've spent all my money on whiskey and beer, and now I'm returning with gold in great store, and I never will play the wild rover no more, and it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, never, no more. Have we all got it?
We got it.
I went to an alehouse I used to frequent was spent. I asked her for credit, she answered me nay. Such a custom mouth yours I could have any day, and it's no, nay, never. Clap, 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 clap. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, never, no more. I'll go home to my parents, confess what I've done, and I'm hoping they'll pardon their prodigal son. And when they've caressed me as oft times before, then I never will play the wild rover no more, and it's no, nay, never. Clap, 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 clap. No, nay, never, no more. Will I play the wild rover? No, never, no more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. Will I play the wild rover? No, never, no more. A museum that is dedicated to telling the story of Viking and Norman Dublin, by the ghost of a woman called Darky Kelly. Darky Kelly struck up an unlikely friendship with the chief sheriff here in Dublin, a man by the name of Simon Luttrell, who was a member of the infamous Hellfire Club and accused of a great many debauched things in his time. However, there was rumours that perhaps Darky Kelly became pregnant with Simon Luttrell's child. Either way, relations between the pair soured, and Simon Luttrell used his high profile to have Darky Kelly burned at the stake in Stephen's Green. There you go, a little full circle moment. You've been on here since Stephen's Green. And now her ghost supposedly haunts the original gate. The original lease is no longer in effect, and the family now own the plot outright, but it is still on display in the storehouse. Arthur Guinness took it as a real point of pride signing this 9,000-year lease, and after he signed it, he went parading with it all throughout the storehouse, showing it off to all. It is slightly different, however, from the type of Guinness brewed here. It was invented to help stand up to those long journeys abroad, because Guinness is quite a temperamental drink that doesn't stand up well to exportation, so they added a load of extra hops to make sure it exported well, and that had the unintended side effect of making it around 10% alcohol. It's quite delicious, but after two of them you will not remember a thing. You can occasionally see it sold here as Guinness Foreign Extra Stout, if you'd like to try it for yourself. We're just now reaching stop 15, where I know we'll have a little bit of a mass exodus. Patron saint of Ireland and Nigeria, as well as Montserrat and parts of New York. Most of New York, except for Brooklyn. The only place St. Patrick's Light can't reach, I suppose. Then there is the second Guinness gate. Got the head of the Sumerian goddess of barley on the top. Up here across the road is the Roe and Co distillery, built in a disused church, the Church of St. James, and it's been fitted with custom stained glass windows which depict the whiskey distillation process. Also, I will reiterate, just for anyone that got onto the bus there, that the bus is quite full, so we'll just ask that you please press the stop button for any stop that you want to get off at. Thanks. One of the most historically significant locations in all of Dublin, because it's here that the leaders of the 1916 Rising were imprisoned and shortly thereafter executed. One such leader was a man by the name of Joseph Mary Plunkett. He had a long-time girlfriend called Grace Gifford, and she received news when the first of those rising leaders had been executed. That was Thomas MacDonagh, and he was married to Grace's sister, Muriel. As soon as she heard MacDonagh had been executed, she knew her own partner Joseph hadn't long left, so she rushed over to Kilmainham that very night and brought along with her a Catholic priest. The two were then married in Joseph Plunkett's jail cell, and they were allowed 15 minutes together, after which, it's not a fun story, after which Grace Gifford had 1955, 39 years after the Easter Rising. And their story is immortalized in the form of a song called Grace. It was written in the 1980s by the O'Mara brothers, and it's become one of the most popular Irish rebel songs here in Ireland. And I'll sing a verse or two of Grace for you now. We're just about to approach stop number 17. As we gather in the chapel here in old Kilmainham jail about these past few weeks, oh, will they say we failed. From our school days they have taught us we must yearn for liberty. But all I want in this dark age is to have you here with me. Oh Grace, just hold me in your arms and let this moment linger. They'll take me out at dawn and I will die. With all my love I place this wedding ring upon your finger. There won't be time to share our love, for we must say goodbye. Now as the dawn is breaking, my heart is breaking too. On this May morn, as I walk out, my thoughts will be of you. And I'll write some words upon the wall, so everyone will know I love so much that I could see his blood upon the road. We're now going to be heading into the Phoenix Park. Phoenix Park is the largest city park in the northern hemisphere. It's almost twice the size of New York's Central Park. It is the location of the Áras Uachtaráin, which is the residence of the president here in Ireland. And if any Americans were to venture on further into the park to go see the Áras Uachtaráin, they might accuse us of ripping off their White House, as the two buildings are almost identical. But I guarantee you that that's not the case, because the Áras Uachtaráin actually predates the White House by about 45 years. And so in many ways, you guys might have ripped us off. Or, to be completely frank, I admitted the defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. If you were to walk up about another 5 minutes, you would reach Dublin Zoo. Dublin Zoo is very, I dare say, it's kind of tranquil zoo experience. Because the animals are quite well treated there, it's very ethically run the zoo. It also has kind of the strange side effect of the animals being a little bit boring, because they're happy and the applicability of feeding the animals or anything like that. So, it's quite a meditative zoo experience heading to Dublin Zoo, or at least that's been my experience. But it wasn't, in fact, a lion at all. It's a bear. Lions have a somewhat anticlimactic roar compared to what people expect, so in order to fit in line with audience expectations, they decided to just sub it in with a bear's roar. As I said, I will throw out a couple of pub recommendations as we're leaving Phoenix Park. So, if you want to go, first of all, right beside our stop number 1, it's about 5 minute walk next to Spire, you can reach the Celt. The Celt has fantastic food. It's got all of your Irish pub food classics, your shepherd's pies and your stews. So if you want to experience that, you can. But before I do that, right here on our left is going to be the Anna Livia statue. That is the personification of the River Liffey, which is the river we're about to head back down now. She's named after a character in James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, and she's been lovingly dubbed by locals the floozy in the jacuzzi. But the Bleeding Horse is one of the oldest pubs I'm aware of in Dublin city centre. It dates back to at least the 17th century, and it's been continuously running as a pub since then. And it's a very, very nice pub. It's near enough. It's about a 10-minute walk from our stop number 12. There's a pub called Dudley's, doing a pub quiz tonight, if that's something that appeals to
Irish, no? Okay. A few things as we're passing. So obviously you're leaving College Green now, going on to Dame Street, and all the streets to my right hand side will bring you down to Temple Bar, where you'll find the most expensive drink in Ireland. Absolutely. You brought it to different parts of the world, and they drank it too. So the weird part about it, that's how confident he was. He would lease that land for a period of 9,000 years. We're about 270 years into that lease, and the rent has not gone up or not gone down. So you try to imagine a yearly rent 270 years ago, which was £100 per year. Diageo are the current owners of the Guinness brand now, but I believe they're selling it. So we are, first of all, we're heading to Moher. That's going to be our first stop. We're going to be stopping at exit 23 on the M7. This is for a comfort stop, so it can be a bathroom break, a coffee break. So that's exit 23 on the M7. It's also known as Barack Obama Plaza. It's the ancestral town of Barack Obama, but it also happens to be exactly halfway between Dublin and Moher, so it's more strategic on my part. Was affected by the British when they come over for the second time. I'll talk about as well as that. I might talk about mythology. got injured in the battle, and she would end up taking care of him. And soon after, they fell in love, and they got quite serious very, very quickly. And so they wanted to take their relationship a little bit further, like physically, but as a norm, societal norms those days, you couldn't do that to do, because they were madly in love, as you can imagine. I'm sure all couples here are madly in love. Lovely to see it. So they didn't break up. What they did instead was they ran away together. They went on the run and they eloped. They got married in secret down in County Wexford. And then from there, not really knowing what to do next, they would receive a letter from her brother, who was living in England at the time, and he told them to come to England and to stay with him. So they went to England so they could be together properly. And soon after that, her brother, again, was an absolute genuine guy, very true to his word, would actually buy them a house. Unbelievably, it was possible in those days, which hard to imagine now. And in that house, they would remain for their entire lives, despite what their families had said. They raised 8 children in the house, and these children would have their own children eventually, and then one of these children would become an internationally renowned singer-songwriter who would write songs for really, really famous people, and still writing songs for famous people. He wrote a song or two for Justin Bieber. I wrote some for One Direction. One of his own songs, he's done some collaboration work with Andrea Bocelli, and for the same song with Beyonce. It is indeed. It is Ed Sheeran. You might do. So, Ed Sheeran, the song is called Nancy Mulligan. So if you haven't heard it, I want you to listen out to the lyrics to see what the issue was between the two families and why they hated each other so much, even though they had never met. So, other than that, our father, our husband, or our brother, or sister, or brother, or our son died of leprosy. So there's no glory in it. So he wanted to go as well. He felt this was kind of a suicide mission, and if he could die in battle, there'd be much more glory in that. So he would go as well. And they would arrive to a place called Dundonald on the southeast coast of Ireland, near Waterford. And the Normans saw them coming and realised, okay, there's 1,500 guys coming towards us and we're in trouble. We have 100. They looked out at sea anxiously to see if the cavalry was coming, but as they didn't finish their fort yet, it would mean that the Anglo-Normans, the rest of the Anglo-Normans were not coming until that was finished, as per the plan. So they realised they were on their own, 100 against 1,500. So they very nervously started firing arrows into the crowd coming towards them, and they were able to take out a few people, but nothing that was going to significantly damage the numbers coming to them. So, as there was no boundary wall set up yet in the fort, the only thing that was separating the two sides in the field where they were was a herd of cattle. Big herd of cattle. So all 100 men, out of desperation, they just ran towards the cattle. They charged at the cattle. The cattle would get spooked and turn and run towards the Irishmen. And the Irishmen, not being disciplined, they would scatter in every single direction to avoid a stampede, which unfortunately a lot of them were caught in, while the others ran in different directions, and they were able to be chased down and killed or taken hostage. And some would retreat back to Waterford to tell the others of what was coming. Now, they'd soon realise again that because of these fancy weapons and fancy armour, things the Irish didn't have. In fact, the Irish, as brave as they were, fought with sticks, and some of them barely clothed, and some of them even naked. So there was no match for the Anglo-Normans. So the hostages that were taken, it would eventually be decided that these hostages must be put to the sword. There was some argument within the camp saying, okay, well, let's use him as a bargaining chip to get what we want. It would be Richard de Clare's uncle who would say, no, not at all. We're not here to bargain. We don't need them. So they must be put to the sword. So all the hostages, about 200 in total, were put to the sword. And surviving all that battle was the leper still. Believe it or not, he still had survived. And word had eventually reached back to England and Richard de Clare, and they realised, okay, this was a huge victory for the 100 Anglo-Normans against all odds. Massive victory. So they went straight to Ireland. They loaded up the boats, sailed for Waterford. So instead of going to Dundonald like they originally planned, they went straight to Waterford town. They docked in, they started taking over the town. I mean, there were people trying to defend, but they were, of course, no match for the Anglo-Normans. The Anglo-Normans completely destroyed the place, killed many, many people who were trying to defend or retreat, and then started taking over the land. And they went on to neighbouring communities and did the same thing. And Rory O'Connor, upon hearing everything that was going on, would make his way down to Waterford, and he'd actually take Dermot McMurrough hostage. And remember, Dermot McMurrough was former High King of Leinster, and he had started all of this. And he was told he was going to be put to the sword for his crimes against Ireland. But Dermot McMurrough, he was spineless, he was a coward, and he begged and he pleaded for his life. And he swore to Rory O'Connor. He swore his loyalty, he swore his allegiance, and he promised him that if you let me go, I will get rid of these foreigners. If you just let me go, I'm the only hope. And Rory O'Connor would eventually realise that he was correct. There were so many of these Anglo-Normans that arrived now in Ireland, and they were so far advanced that Dermot McMurrough was probably the best option he had. So he let him go. Naively, because Dermot McMurrough would go back on his word. He'd go and get his daughter, bring her down to Waterford, where she would be married to Richard de Clare, while surrounded by absolute carnage that Richard de Clare and the Anglo-Normans had left behind them. Dermot McMurrough would eventually be given his throne back, and he'd start giving over the land, which a lot of land he gave in Leinster to these Anglo-Normans. And the Anglo-Normans would start building castles on these land. And in total they would take approximately 30% of the land in Ireland. And again, these Anglo-Normans would end up becoming very, very powerful in Ireland. But eventually, they were a lot of land with extreme violence. Things would settle down and they'd start living in peace. A lot of the native Irish would have actually worked with these Anglo-Normans. And by the 16th century, these Anglo-Normans had become Anglo-Irish. They were very much part of Irish society. They spoke Irish. So, but just for everyone to know, Irish is Gaelic, Gaelic is Irish. So if they spoke Irish, you would have taken part in the Irish cultural activities, and you were still Catholic but loyal to the crown. And then in the 16th century there was a king in England by the name of King Henry VIII. And this is where everything would change in Ireland. So King Henry VIII was having some issues with his wives, plural. Annulled, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. That was the fate of 6 wives. And he was getting fed up with the wives. Whenever he get fed up, for example, if they didn't give him a male heir, he'd want to divorce them, but he couldn't because he was Catholic, and the Pope wouldn't give him permission. So he'd make up some sort of crap about them, that they'd betrayed him in some way. They betrayed the crown, and he'd have them beheaded. But eventually, he'd get so sick of the Pope and the Pope's rules, he decided to make up his own religion, the Church of England. So basically he could do whatever he wanted, because they were his rules. this would eventually become the Protestant religion. So everybody would have to convert from Catholic to the Church of England. So no problems in Wales, England or Scotland, but in Ireland there was no chance. You were met with resistance, and a hell no, we're not converting. We're Catholics and that's it. So to counteract this refusal, they started organising plantations in Ireland. So that place we were just at, Portlaoise Plaza, the first place they went to was Portlaoise, around Laois and Offaly, those two places, and they had a plantation in Leinster. So the plantation was not the planting of crops or planting of flowers, the planting of people. Rich English, rich Scottish coming to Ireland and taking the land off the Irish, evicting them, killing them if necessary, and then completely taking over. So these are extreme violent situations. As well as that, there's a huge sectarian element to it as well, because we were told that these Irish Catholics are refusing to convert to the more modern Protestant religion, so that means they're sinning against God, so they must be punished. Sinning against God. They're animals, they're backwards. We have to show them a way. Whatever way works is fine. So after a couple of decades, they'd have another plantation in Munster, the south of Ireland. Again, just as extreme. And then eventually, in the late 16th century, early 17th century, another plantation in Ulster. Again, the biggest one and the worst one, and probably the most violent one, where many English and Scottish could completely take over Ulster. Eventually, 1641, there would be a rebellion. The Irish hated. So, just for the purpose of the trip, whenever you hear his name mentioned, I want you guys to boo. Okay? So, I expect 94 people to boo. Okay, even if you're asleep, I want you booing in your sleep. So his name was Oliver Cromwell. Come on, guys, you can do better than that. His name was Oliver Cromwell. Alright, okay, a little better. John Power. It will be his daughter that would lead a very tenacious defence against the Cromwellians. And she got them as far as winter 1649. And in winter, it's miserable in Ireland. I mean miserable. Cold, it's wet, it's damp. So people start coming down with illnesses all the time, like flus or fevers. And the same was in 1649. When these Cromwellians started coming down with illnesses, they decided it was best to retreat. And they decided to retreat, instead of camp somewhere else, outside of Waterford. And they would come back in spring, when the weather improved. Now in the castle, they breathed a huge sigh of relief. They defeated the Cromwellians, or so they thought. And they wanted to celebrate, and the gunners were doing probably the most celebrations. And one particular gunner would ask the Power family for more wine to continue the celebrations, but would be told no. So anyone who likes the wine will know that buttermilk is definitely not the same thing. In fact, you cannot get drunk on buttermilk. So this really upset the gunner. In fact, he took this as a sign of huge disrespect on behalf of the gunners from the Power family, and he held on to a resentment and a hatred for the family until spring 1650. And when spring 1650 came round, so did the Cromwellians. They came back. The gates were open. The gunner had let them in because of his hatred for the Power family. That was his revenge. So once the Cromwellians had gone into the castle, they completely destroyed it. They killed everybody. The best thing to do with this gunner was to hang him, because he was a traitor after all. Didn't he betray his own people? Yes, he did. And if he would betray his own people, he'd betray them just as quick. And so the Cornwallians had no use for him, so he was hanged for being a traitor. And when I say they destroyed the castle, they left it in ruin. So the way it is now is pretty much how they left it. And it's quite eerie even to visit it. So the Cornwallians would continue their rampage through Ireland, and every place they went to they would take. A lot of the castle owners at this stage would realise that these Cromwellians do not mess around. So instead of trying to defend their castle, what they would do is they would abandon the castle completely, take their possessions and get out of there. A lot of the monasteries as well would become abandoned, because again, the Catholic religion was outlawed. And on the land you can continue, but you're going to be having to pay rent to your new landlord, British Protestant, or to Connacht. Again, there was no plantation in the west of Ireland, the west coast of Ireland, and the reason being, the English had no interest in the west of Ireland because it's extremely rocky. Even now, it's extremely rocky. So when these farmers would move out to the west coast of Ireland, they'd have to try and remove as much of the rock as they could from the land, just so they could grow some crops or graze livestock. So the first crop they'd start growing would be the potato after they had just arrived. Potato would become known as the poor man's crop because of this. And it's very easy to grow, very cheap to grow. So it doesn't matter how much money you have, and how they raise the money is through memberships and fundraising and sponsorships and even government grants. So politicians are also involved in these clubs too, trying to get as many grants as they can for the local GAA club because that's where the votes are. So I'm going to play a little song now. It's called Killa. It's from a guy who played a lot of her role. The plot of the movie will be a young man from China by the name of Yu Ming, living and working in the main city. Respond to your name, that question, you say your name in Irish, you say your name first. So for example, if your name is Colin, you say Colleen is Anam Dum. If your name is Peter, you say Padder is Anam Dum. If your name is Maria, Myra is Anam Dum. So you say your name and you say Is Anam Dum. That's how you say your name in Irish. Now to ask someone how they are in Irish, you say Cunis atá tú. Like, how are you? Cunis atá tú. And to say I'm fine, Tá mé go maith. Tá mé go maith. So he would listen to these phrases and repeat, listen, repeat until he had them perfect. And eventually he gets to a stage where he would have them perfect, he'd go into more phrases, and he'd be bringing his cassette tapes and books with him to work. And while stacking his shelves, he wasn't the same bored young man he once was. He had a purpose now. So he had his cassette tapes, his headphones in, repeating whatever he's listening to in Irish, and he gets some very strange looks from his managers who were leaving the plate and the meat had just fallen off because he just couldn't get used to the knife and fork. So in the end, he'd turn his knife and fork upside down and start using them as chopsticks just so he could feed himself. The following day he'd go looking for work, and the old saying goes, things will get worse before they get better. This was true as well in Yu Ming's case, because he arrived at a bar, and behind the barman was a young man from Ireland, and he approached him and he asked him, "On what lane over on Shaw lay the Hull?" Which means, "Is there any work here, please?" And the Irishman misunderstood him, and he just simply said, "Sorry mate, we don't have any over you're looking for. We'll still Artois do you instead. Or what about Budweiser? Or maybe Guinness? That's Irish." Thinking he was looking for a drink. But at this stage, Yu Ming would kind of realise there was a big problem here. No one understood him. He didn't understand anyone. So he just said sorry. He said, "I'm sorry." And in Irish, that is Tá brón orm, which means literally, sadness is upon me. Tá brón orm, he said. "I've only been studying Irish for 6 months. If you give me an opportunity, I won't let you down. I'm determined my Irish will improve, I promise you." But of course the Irishman did not understand the word he was saying. But thankfully in every pub across the world, there's always an old man sitting at the bar, listening to conversations. And this old man was very surprised when he saw a young man from China speaking his native tongue. So he called him over to find out more about him. He said, "Government Eshkale, see she is on shot," which means, "Excuse me, sit down here with me." So Yu Ming sat down with the old man. And the old man asked him a question. "Cod son of ditch." Again, which means, "What is your name?" So Yu Ming had a big massive smile on his face because somebody finally understood him. "Yu Ming is an dumb," he said, smiling from ear to ear. And he told the old man he was having a difficult time. He arrived in Ireland yesterday, but he's having problems with the language. So the old man was very surprised by this. He said, "Hold on, you arrived in Ireland yesterday, and already you speak Irish. It's amazing." But Yu Ming said, no one understands me here. My Irish is really bad." But the old man told him that, in fact, your Irish is better than most people in the country, because most people in the country only speak English. And Yu Ming was shocked. He's thinking, now I've learned the language for nothing. But the old man told him that although the signs are there, it's actually, in fact, every road sign is in Irish. Most of them are Irish and English, but all of them are in Irish. Irish on the top and English on the bottom. So without getting into the history, which he didn't explain, he just said in the west of Ireland, that's where they speak Irish. So he was relieved that he hadn't learned the language for nothing. So he remembered. Be going too far into the main street. It would have had just basically the more challenging it becomes. fantastic photos. But no matter where you stand on the cliffs, even behind the barriers, you're going to get great photos. So even though you might get the best photo or the best selfie, there's a good chance that no one will ever see it. Fishing. When all of a sudden something big caught on the bait of Fionn McCool's rod, and he got a big fright and he screamed. He said, "I've got something big!" And Phineas came running over because he knew straight away what it was. Something that he'd actually forgotten about. It was the salmon of knowledge. It was huge. It was bigger than he even thought it was. So, with Phineas's help, Fionn was able to reel in the salmon of knowledge, and he placed it down at the table, and Phineas was delighted and exhausted. And Fionn was also delighted, but for different reasons. Fionn was happy because he caught a huge fish, and Phineas was delighted because he knew what it meant. Here's Paddy Wagon. Probably number 2 tourist, a bit older. He was also exhausted, and he asked Fionn to gather up some firewood, light a fire, and start cooking the fish while he lay down to rest, because he needed to rest after trying to catch that fish. So Fionn agreed, because again he would have done anything his master had asked him to do. He respected him so much. So he started gathering up some firewood, he lit a fire and started cooking the fish while Phineas lay down to rest. After a while, the fish would start to blister, and one after another, pop, 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 Fionn would start bursting the blisters using his fingers. But eventually, one big blister appeared at the other side of the fish, and he reached his hand over and burst it with his thumb. But a lot of the hot fatty oils would end up burning his thumb, and then he kind of screamed in pain. So he put his thumb in his mouth to ease the pain, and then he accidentally tasted the fish, and something strange happened to him. All these weird sensations traveling through his body which he didn't understand, so he let them pass, and he felt different, he felt unusual. So he finished cooking the fish, he brought the fish to Phineas, and he was going to ask him about what was that all about, because he didn't understand it. But as soon as Phineas woke up and saw Fionn, he knew there was something different about him. So he asked Fionn, "Did you eat the fish?" And Fionn assured him that he hadn't. But Phineas saw it in his eyes. You definitely looked like you ate the fish. So he told him what happened when he burst the blister. And it was at that point he knew it was too late. Fionn had not eaten the fish, but he had tasted it. Inadvertently, mind you, but he had tasted it. And that was all it would take. Fionn was now the wisest man in Ireland, and he would now become the greatest warrior Ireland had ever seen. He led the army, the Fianna, to many battles, and become then an Irish legend. Of course, Phineas was very disappointed that it wasn't him that became the wisest man in Ireland, but he was also very happy for his apprentice, Fionn. So that's part 1. Part 2 to follow, don't worry guys. But now I'm going to talk about the period, probably the worst period in Irish history. So during the Cromwell, somewhere between 15 and 25% of people in Ireland died during that period, so almost a quarter of the population. So yeah, he's still a reviled figure in Ireland for good reason. But it wasn't the worst period. Because back in the 19th century, the early 19th century, as I mentioned already, the Irish, the poorest of the poor of the Irish, would rely heavily on the potato. I mean, really heavily on the potato. They depended solely on the potato, not just for food, but for income. Because they needed the income, of course, to pay the rent to their landlords. So, when it started to fail in the beginning of the 19th century, it was only sporadic. So the Irish didn't really know what to do at the time. So what they started doing was, they started pawning off possessions. Anything that might have been worth something, they'd pawn it to get enough money then to pay the rent and pay for other types of food. And they would hope then by the following year or following season the potato would recover. And it would. In the first few decades it would recover, and they were able to pay the rent and maybe survive. But only just. But then 1845 came and 50% of the crop was reported to have failed. It was hit with a bacteria called the potato blight. But again, you see, the Irish not having access to news, of course Instagram or anything like that, or Google, or TV or radio, because again it was the mid-19th century, they didn't know how broad the problem was. They just assumed it was like just in their village. So they did the exact same thing that they'd always done, that was pawn off the possessions. Again, to pay the rent was due twice a year. First installment in April. So first installment in April, and then they'd hope again for the following year it would recover. But when 1846 came, not only did the potato not recover, it got worse. 100% of the crop failed, and that was the point they realised they were in big trouble, because they had no way of paying the rent. And the landlords weren't very forgiving. They weren't very open to negotiations. So if they weren't getting the rent, most of the landlords would just simply burn the roof off the house. So I'm going to show you an example of one of these houses a little later on. We'll be passing by one of them. I should pass by quite a few of them today. So they simply burned the roof off because the roof was made of thatch, and that meant that then they'd nowhere to go. They had nothing to protect them from the elements. Having tenants in their properties without paying rent. So what they did, instead of burning them out, is they offered schemes to some of their tenants. But they could all apply for these schemes, and the schemes would involve the landlords paying for the entire families to cross from Ireland to the US. Initially it was US, then later on it would be US, Canada, Mexico, and even some then to Argentina, and then later on the UK and Australia, but initially it was US. And to apply for these schemes, you had to basically write a begging letter explaining to the landlord how difficult your situation was, and he would then decide whether your situation was really, really difficult, probably one of the most difficult. Then he'd send you over with money to get settled as well, and that was cheaper than burning the house and having to rebuild it to try and get other tenants. So that's what they did. And then there was other families who were a little bit more fortunate, but not a lot more fortunate, just a little bit, where they'd have enough money to send their oldest son or oldest daughter over across the Atlantic Ocean. And once they got there, they'd get a job, and then they'd send money back to their families for the rest of them to join them, because they'd no intention of trying to stay in Ireland and try and make things work, because they'd no idea how long this problem was going to last. They just knew that if they didn't move, they were going to die. So again, this is out of desperation. But to make this journey from Ireland across the Atlantic Ocean was a very, very long, difficult and arduous journey. The boats, Germany, pretty much all over the world, what was going on. And of course the English weren't looking too good, especially when it was they realised that they decided to keep the free market open So what that meant, so the Queen Victoria, even though she might have been young and ill-advised, she would want the free market open. So all food that was produced in Ireland, there was a lot, would be exported out of Ireland to the UK. So all these other countries started trying to send aid, send help to the Irish. But all that aid wouldn't arrive to Ireland untouched. It would be intercepted because, again, the Queen felt under pressure. She needed to also donate some aid, again, to the situation she caused and her and her policies. But she realised the aid that was coming in was there's absolutely no way, you're not touching our stuff. So they went to Drogheda straight away and avoided the British, bypassed them completely, and delivered the aid themselves personally to the people in Drogheda. Again, Drogheda is my hometown, so this is actually still remembered to this day, their kindness. In fact, the Drogheda United Football Club have on their crest an emblem of the Ottoman Empire in acknowledgement of the help that they received from them during that period. So further pressure is put on the Queen and the English, so they decide, okay, right, this is what we do, we'll feed them. We'll make sure they don't starve. So we'll feed them. So they began to provide soups. But not to everybody, only to the people that would convert from Catholic to Protestant. And of course, the younger generations, people would convert because they didn't want to starve, but the older generations, because again, these Irish weren't educated, the only education they received was from a parish priest, and the parish priest would tell them, if you take that soup, you'll go to hell. So that's the only education they received, and if the parish priest told you you're going to hell if you take the soup, you didn't take the soup. Now mind you, the parish priest wasn't in that situation where he was starving for his life. So there's no record of any Catholic priest dying during that period. So overall, where they had a bit of money to send their oldest children over to the US. So they sent their two eldest boys over to the US, and once they got through all their checks at Ellis Island, into New York they went, and they were told, guys, listen, we're full. New York is full, Chicago, Boston, Washington, all full here. Along the East Coast is full. Canada have started taking in Irish refugees now. So you can go to Canada, or you can go down to Mexico, or you can go west. And if you go west, you're going to be able to claim some land. So the idea of an Irish farmer owning their own land in the 19th century was too much of an opportunity to pass. So they decided they were going to head west. With nothing more than their clothes on their backs, they made their way all the way to the west, all the way to California. And just as they had been told, they were able to claim some land. And they did the only thing they knew how to do, because they had no education. So they began to work the land. And soon the land would start returning a profit to them, and they were able to send some of the profit back to Wicklow. And when the family eventually arrived in California, they realised that they had almost replicated their little village in County Wicklow. Because again, this village is tiny in County Wicklow. And they tried to replicate it. Not only did they replicate it, they also gave the exact same name, which was Hollywood. So that's where Hollywood, California gets its name from, Hollywood, County Wicklow. There's even a Hollywood sign on the hills in County Wicklow. And yes, the village of Hollywood, County Wicklow has not changed. It's still the exact same. The only difference is it has the Hollywood sign as more of an acknowledgement to the connection. But the local story, as I was telling you, there's one from County Clare from how beautiful it is. What's in the distance on the left is, these are Gaeltacht regions. It's north of Galway. Talk about Connemara, Spittle, and many other towns. And they're all Gaeltacht regions. There's another one of those cottages on the left hand side. Terrorising the people of Scotland, and they're terrified of him. And anytime they see him coming, they run a mile, and he just destroys. They're just terrified. So Fionn had heard enough. He said, right side. I looked closely at this baby. This baby was about 7 feet tall. I looked closer again, and he asked Una, "Is this your baby?" And Una responded, "Yes, that's Fionn Jr. He's just 6 months old." So he's thinking to himself, wow, this baby is massive. Long blonde hair this baby has. This baby's a big red beard. This baby smells of whiskey. So imagine, if the baby's that big, how big is the father? So he wasn't going to hang around to find out. He left there as quick as he could, ran back to Scotland, and started destroying the bridge, throwing all the stones back to Ireland so Fionn wouldn't be able to follow him. And eventually Fionn did get to the northern coast, saw that the bridge was being destroyed. He wanted to throw something at it, but he couldn't find anything big enough, so he just lifted up a piece of the earth out of the ground to throw it in his direction, but he missed him by a mile. Miles and miles actually. And this piece of earth would end up in the middle of the Irish Sea. It's still there, in fact. Closer to realise there was a beautiful young woman on the horse, and Oisin had fallen in love head over heels as soon as he saw her. And she got close to the two men, and then she introduced herself. She said, "My name is Niamh Sin Or," which means I'm Niamh with the golden hair, and I come from a land called Tirnanog, which means land of eternal youth. I've come here for Oisin. Myself and Oisin are going to get married, and then we're going to rule the land of Tirnanog. And Fionn wasn't too keen on letting his son go somewhere he wasn't sure of, never heard of. He didn't like the sound of it, but Oisin, like I said, he's already in love, madly in love, and he wanted to go. At this age he was already a young adult, so he could make his own decisions. So Fionn didn't stand in his way, and Oisin would say goodbye to his parents, Fionn and Una. And he'd go back to Tirnanog with Niamh, and just as Niamh said, they would get married and they began to rule the land of Tirnanog, and they were really, really happy for about 3 years in Tirnanog, until one day Oisin said, "I want to return home to see my family." He started feeling homesick, and this was to create some problems. Una informed Oisin that he could not return back to Ireland, because if he set foot on Irish soil, he will never be able to return to Tirnanog. So it was out of the question. So Oisin was very disappointed, very sad. So he insisted, he said there has to be a way, and he reminded her of the fact that she actually went and was able to come back, so there has to be a way. So she said, right, yes, you're right, sir, white horse. So take my white horse, but do not set foot on Irish soil. No matter what happens, you stay on that horse. So Oisin was very happy, and he agreed to stay on the horse. And he went back to Ireland. When he got to Ireland, he realised that Una was right. Everything had changed in Ireland because time had passed differently. For every 1 year in Chernobyl was like 103 years, so it was 300 years had passed. So his family was long gone. The army that he was once part of had just become legend. The castle had become into ruin. The castle had become into ruin, and everything he'd known and everybody he'd known was long gone. So he was really, really sad. And he roamed around Ireland for a little while on the back of the white horse, not really knowing what to do, until he came across a group of farmers trying to remove a cart from their land, which was blocking the entrance. And the group of men could not move the cart, it was stuck. And Oisin, of course, having the strength of 10 men just like his father had, he would go over and he'd reach over with his hand, one hand, and he'd push the cart out of the way. But unfortunately, the momentum of the cart would pull him off the horse as he was pushing it, so his feet would touch the Irish soil. And what happened then shocked the lot of them. He began to age. He aged rapidly. The men got shocked, and a couple of them went to find St. Patrick. St. Patrick came back, and they saw that Oisin was aging very quickly in front of him, and they told him there was nothing he could do. But at that stage, St. Patrick, of course, had come to Ireland and was preaching Christianity, so he preached Christianity to Oisin. And he stayed with Oisin until he passed away. And Oisin, of course, continued telling his stories about Chernobyl and his father and the legends of the Fina and all those stories, so they could be passed on as well. So eventually he would pass, and he never returned to Chernobyl. And in case anyone was wondering, neither did the horse. So if anyone sees a horse now, it is believed to be a descendant of that white horse from the land of eternal youth, Chernobyl. So that's the 3 of the stories. So
the parking bays marked bus are for bus parking only. All other vehicles parked in this area may be stickered or clamped.